In this video, we're going to look at multi-mode. Please make sure you've watched the previous video covering filter, level, pitch, envelope, and loop slice in main mode before you watch this video covering those same functions in multi-mode, as otherwise this will be harder to follow than Pac-Man in a ball pool. I've started by loading a sample onto track A1. As covered in the last video, this track has a set of parameters: filter, level, pitch, envelope, and loop slice. We'll look at filter last as it works slightly differently, so I'll select level and then select multi-mode. I now have 8 additional sets of parameters for this track, hence it's a multi-mode. I can now use the faders to set 8 different levels for this one sample. When we get to the sequencing and programming video, you'll see that you can utilize this and record multi-mode parts. Next, I'll navigate to pitch whilst in multi-mode, and I can now use the faders to set up an additional 8 different pitch values for the same sample. Pitch resolution, that was demonstrated in the previous video, is still applicable in multi-mode. Next, if I select envelope whilst in multi-mode, I now have 8 additional sets of envelopes for this track. You can still activate the Hi-Fi envelope editor per multi using the B buttons, cycle through the envelopes per multi using Shift and the B buttons, and activate the optional classic volume envelope for all multis within this track from the track settings menu, accessed by pressing Shift and A on any multi. For multi-mode loop slice, I'm going to switch samples from a one-shot to a drum groove, as this will help demonstrate this more effectively. By the way, if I press the pad, the drum sample plays back. If I want it to stop playing, I just hit Shift plus back, or run stop twice. So you don't have to sit there and wait for a longer bit of audio to play all the way through, you can stop it. An additional option, you can hit Shift and the pad to open the track settings menu and then activate gated mode, where the track will only play whilst the pad is held down. Press loop slice and activate multi-mode, then press B on the track in question to bring up the sample editor. I can now set up 8 additional slices and 8 additional loops for this drum groove, 1 on each pad. Everything is the same as was shown in the previous video with start points, loop points, end points, repeats, zero crossing, zooming, normalization, saving, etc. If you need a quick reminder, hit the help button for the slice help. To move between each slice, use the pads. A quick note on memory: a detailed explanation of waveform memory is found in the manual. But in simple terms, files smaller than 2 megabytes will have no loading time, but files larger than 2 megabytes but smaller than the maximum of 64 megabytes will have a small loading time. But once you're done editing, there's obviously no delay with triggering or playback. Finally, the filters. Whilst in either level or pitch, you can also edit the filters per multi. Press Shift and B to bring up the filter settings, from where you can check multi enabled. Now you can use Shift and the B buttons to access the filter settings for each multi, where you can set up discrete modes as well as cutoff and resonance values. We'll cover multi-mode sync in a moment and override in another video, but if you scroll to the bottom of each settings menu, you can use the Set for All Tracks options if you want to switch all the values for all the tracks in your entire project at once. Now, things are about to get a wee bit tasty because we can activate multi-mode sync. What does this mean? It means that instead of using one parameter at a time, level, pitch, filter, envelope, loop, slice, you can choose parameters that you wish to be synced and have them simultaneously active. So I could discretely and simultaneously set up the filter, level, pitch, envelope and loop slice per multi within one track. To demonstrate the power of this, I'm going to load up one single note from my Pt.3. Juicy. I'm going to start with pitch this time, so I hit pitch and multi-mode and then hit Shift and press an A button to bring up the pitch settings menu. From here, I will activate multi-mode sync. Press back to return and then use the faders to set 8 pitches. Whilst still in pitch mode, I'll hit Shift and B on one multi to bring up the filter settings. Again, I will activate Multimode Sync. I'm now going to use the pads to move from one multi to another, and I will set different filter modes for each, some low pass, some band pass, and some high pass. I will also use the stack knobs to dial in the initial filter position and resonance for each of the 8 filters. So that's now 8 different pitches and 8 different filter setups, but we can keep going. Next, I'll switch to level and, you guessed it, hit Shift and A to bring up the level settings, from where I will activate Multimode Sync for level. Hit back to return and use the faders to balance out the levels of your multis to your choosing. Particularly useful when mixing multis that use different filter modes and resonance amounts, hence I did this after setting up the filters. Finally, I will head down to envelope and oh my sweet lord, I can hit Shift and A to bring up the envelope settings menu, from where I can activate Multimode Sync for the envelopes. If I also activate the classic volume envelope, as shown in the previous video, I now have 3 envelopes per multi that can contour volume, filter cutoff, and pitch. You can also use Multimode Sync for your loops and slices too, but for now, as I've been using a one-note sample, loops and slices aren't really applicable. Instead, I'm going to show you a baseline using the multi-mode filter, level, pitch, and envelope we just set up with some simple accompaniment. Now to reiterate, the bassline came from one single note from a Pt.3 and it was contained within one track of the 32 available, and it only used one single channel of the 16 output channels. Now consider that you're not restricted to one single note from a Pt.3 and that you can assign any audio you like to a track up to 64 megabytes, and you're probably going. And we haven't even looked at sequencing yet. We'll do that in the next video.